Okay, welcome back. We are continuing to work on that PO 46. Left off, we were talking about choosing those smart numbers for your x's for the input to make it easy to work through that equation. So, we can see how when we have that equation to work it out. Now, we're going to do a little bit harder. After a week of timing yourself during your morning run, you discover that you can run 4 miles per hour. Let H represent the number of hours you run, and D represents the distance that you run. Okay, so what are we going to put into our equation? We've got, so we are running 4 miles per hour. What is it that we're choosing? We're choosing the number of hours you run, right? So that's what we're choosing. If I run 2 hours, how far am I going to go? If I run 5 hours, how far am I going to go? So our input is what we are going to be changing up. So our input is the hours. What is the output going to be? The miles. So it's that distance that you run. As it says, let H represent the number of hours and D is representing that distance. Write an equation that relates the input to the output. So we know the output is what it equals. What would our equation be with the hours to figure out what the distance is? Harper? But instead of x, we're going to use the h, the hours. Because we know that we run 4 miles per hour. So 4 times the hours, and then we'll see what our distance is. So that's our equation. Now, D says create a function table that will show how far you run in 3 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, and in 20 hours. So I'm going to make my table. Instead of it X and Y, I have H and D because my input is the number of hours. They're giving me those numbers. 3, 8, 12, and 20. What is my distance for each of those? Christina? Yeah, if I run 3 hours, 3 times 4 is 12 miles. What if I run for 8 hours? Amala? 32 miles. What if I run 12 hours? 48 miles. And what if I run 20 hours? Hadley? 80 miles. Now, we'll notice that when we see this question, create a function table that will show how far you run in 3 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, 20 hours. We can see that we're changing up our hours. So if you're not sure what the input is, look at the questions that come after it and it might help you figure it out. If I know I'm changing how many hours I'm putting into my equation, I'm putting it into the equation, so that's my input. So that's going to be a clue to help you figure out what your input is. Now, how long will you need to run to go 62 miles? How can I figure that out? How can I use the same equation to figure out how long I need to run to go 62 miles? Hadley? Yeah, because it would be that 4h equals my distance of 62. I want to get the h by itself. I want to figure out that hours. So Hadley's absolutely right. Opposite operation, say I divide by 4. What is 62 divided by 4? Yeah, 15 and a half hours. Now it says if you burn 250 calories per hour of running, how many calories will you burn if you go 62 miles? I'll do. Yeah, because we take that 15.5 and we times it by that 250 and we get 3,875 calories. So we just take it one step at a time. When we go slow and we slow ourselves down, we don't let ourselves get overwhelmed, we can figure these out. So, you pick up a summer job. Mr. Schultz started working when he was 14. You're not quite 14 yet, but you can pick up a summer job that pays a base salary of $500 and an additional $9 per hour worked. Let H represent the number of hours you work, and M represent the money that you earn. So, looking at all of our questions, A, B, C, D, and E, can you figure out what the input is going to be? Christina, how did you figure out it was hours, Christina? So if we look at D, it says how much will you earn after working an hour? 8 hours, 5 days, 4 weeks, it's all that time. So we know our input is going to be hours. What's the output going to be? Hadley? Money. How much are you going to earn after working all of this? Now we need to write an equation that relates the input to the output. So we have a base salary of $500 and an additional $9 per hour worked. What do you think that equation is going to look like? You can try, Harper. Okay. So we've got 9H because it's $9 per hour worked. Is there anything more that's going to go in there? Did we have more information? David? We have a base salary of $500. So we're going to always be adding that $500 to how much we've worked. And that's going to equal our money. So you want to make sure that you're always including each bit of information given. Base salary of $500 says we are always going to have $500. So we're adding to that 500. Now, create a function table that will show how much you will earn after working an hour, 8 days, 5 days, 4 weeks. So we have our hours and we have our money. What number should I put for my input? David?
1.
My first number is going to be 1. I work an hour, 1 hour. How much money am I going to have if I work for 1 hour? Vivian? Say it again? $509. What's my next number input going to be? Harper? 8 hours. If I work for 8 hours, how much money am I going to get? $572. 9 times 8 is 72. 72 plus 500 is 572. What's my next input going to be? Michael? Why 120? So, I like the way you're thinking. We want to convert to hours. But I'm going to look back here and see that a day is 8 hours. Because I am not going to work every single hour of the day. Whew, if I work 24 hours a day, I would be exhausted. I am only working 8 hours in a day. So that's going to change your number. What number should we do now, Michael? 40. If I'm working 5 days a week, it's 40 hours a day. Or sorry, 8 hours a day, so 40 hours in the week. That's a pretty standard full-time job to work a 40-hour week. How much money am I going to earn if I work 40 hours in my week? Luke? Nope. Adley? 860. Do you know what you forgot to do, Luke? Forgot to add your 500 onto it. Don't forget when we have to add that a number on. You really want that extra $500. Don't forget it. Now, how much money am I going to make in a month? So, how many hours would that be for a month, Natalie?
224.
How'd you get 224?
I did.
How many hours are in 1 week, Natalie? Remember that 1 week was 40 hours. So if I'm doing a month is 4 weeks, what's it going to be, Vivian?
160.
160, because that 40 hours times 4 weeks would be 160. How much money am I going to make in a month? Robbie?
1,940.
1,940, because I take my 160 hours times 9, and then I add 500 to it. How are we feeling? Following along? All right, we've got one more question. About how many hours do you need to work to earn enough to be able to deposit $750 into your savings account? How do I solve this one? David,
Dividing the 8.
what equation should I write out first?
750 minus 500.
I'm going to write my whole equation out first. We're jumping to our first step. But our equation, we've got 9H plus 500, and that equals $750. I want to solve for the H. So I want to do those opposite operations that we know how to do. Our first opposite operation is subtracting. So I'm going to subtract 500. And I have 9H equals 250. What's my next step? Wait, Natalie, do you see how I got that?
I can't.
All right, I was trying to keep it so we could see all of our equations, but I need to scroll up. So I'm going to erase that. So we had our equation of 9H plus 500, and that equaled the money. Well, we know our money is 750. So we want to solve for the hours. How many hours do we need to work? So if I'm solving, I want to get hours on one side by itself. So I need to do opposite operations to move everything to the other side of the equal sign. So doing that SADMER, I'm subtracting that 500. So I have 9H equals 250. What do I do next? Claire?
Divide by 9.
Divide by 9. both sides, because I want to get h by itself. What is 250 divided by 9? Harper. 27.7H. Now our question says, about how many hours? So I'm going to round that to my nearest hour. Luke? 28 hours to earn $750. Then it says, about how many work days is that? What do you think, LJ? Yeah. So 28 divided by 8. I know 28 doesn't go evenly into that. So I would say about 3.5 work days. And I need to label that so I can keep straight my answers. So 3.5 work days. Does that make sense? All right. Time is 12:24. Well, let's look at our next one. You're going to try to figure out the first part on your own, and then we're going to talk it through. So your cell phone bill reported that you spent 80 hours on the phone last month. You agreed to decrease that time by a half hour each month. Let M represent the number of months and T represent the amount of time you spend on the phone. See if you can do A, B, and C right now. What's the input? What's the output? And then let's see if you can figure out the equation that goes with it. So we know that we have M for months and T for time. See if you can figure out the input and the output. And then what would our equation look like? So, first question, how do we know what the input is? What's the easiest way to figure that out? Harper? Yeah, if I look at the further questions, look at D. Can I figure out what my input's gonna be? What do you think that input is, Fallon? Months, because I am changing up 2 months, 6 months, that year, and 3 years. So my input is going to be months. So that leaves me with what is my output. If months is the input, what is the output, Hadley? Time. Now comes the tricky part. Who thinks they know what the equation would be? If we decrease, so your cell bill reported you spent 80 hours on the phone last month. You agreed to decrease that time by half each month. What should that equation be? Graham? Why am I multiplying it by 50? $80 what? So I've got 80 hours. and I want to decrease it by a half hour each month. So remember with that top one, we had a base salary of 500, right? We got $500 no matter what. Do we have a base that we're going with here? That 80 hours. So we have that 80 hours as our base. And we want to decrease. So what operation is that if I'm decreasing? Okay. I'm going to subtract. Now, I've already done the 80 hours. So now I'm going to look at that half hour each month. So if I'm decreasing it by that half hour, that's the half, 0.5, every month. So this objective is really making us think through what that equation is going to be. Figuring out the input is easier when we look at what we're changing up in our function table. And then we can figure out what the output is once we know the input. But it's really thinking about what our information is telling us on how to figure out our equation. Now that we know the equation, we can do our function table. We've got the input of months, the output of time. Starting with 2 months. 2 times a half gives me 1. 80 minus 1 is 79. Then I have 6 months. A half times 6 is 3. So 80 minus 3 is 77. Now I have a year. What do I put for my input? Robbie?
12.
12, because there are 12 months in a year. A half of 12 is 6. 80 minus 6 is 74. What's my next input going to be? Christina?
36.
Why 36?
Because there's 36 months.
Because if there's 12 months in 1 year, times that by 3, and we get our 36 months. So we have 36. Half of that would be 18. So 80 minus 18 is 62. Now we go to E. You think that 20 hours on your phone each month is reasonable. How many months will it take for you to reach your goal? So again, we go back to our equation. T equals 80 minus 5 minus a half times months. So what numbers can I fill in? I've got 20 hours. That's my time. That equals 80 minus a half times my months. What do I have to do to figure out my months? David? Because I have to do what? Opposite operations. I want to solve for my months, so I have to move everything to the opposite side of the equal sign. I need to do my opposite operations. With SADMERP, I start with adding or subtracting. I have a positive 80, so I need to subtract 80. 20 minus 80 is negative 60 minus a half times the m. So when it's minus a half, that's a negative half I'm left with. So if it's a negative half times months, I'm multiplying it, so I need to do the opposite and divide out that negative half. Does that make sense? We're dividing out that negative half. We've done the opposite operations, those two-step operations. We subtracted, now we're dividing out at negative half. What's negative 60 divided by a negative half? Robbie?
Negative 120.
Negative 60 divided by negative half. What's a negative divided by a negative, Robbie?
A positive.
A positive. So you were right with the 120, but it's a positive 120 because it was a negative divided by a negative. So it's going to take me 120 months to reach my goal. So you have one page you're going to work on with the recipe and the building a floor. Do your best. If you are watching this at home, I hope you are well. I hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful day.